Greetings, free people across the earth. For my common folk, for my common folk, our simple people were on the level where the international, that's a community, operate. So I come across this information and choose to share this side of the information. Because people learn from different places, different sources. And because we are no scholars here, because we are the dumb people, the idiots, this is us. Yeah, the fools, this is us. So it makes sense for we apply ourselves. However, it not, we can't just jump into the thing, in the middle. I try to get things done. It makes sense for share the basic information with our people, our basic people, so them can at least have an idea. Now, this document is called the Federal Zone. Yeah, man. And it's a cracking the code of the Internal Revenue by Mitch, Modeleski. I'm not going to necessarily play this document per se, because, copyright issues, and these people want to make sure, say, them get compensated for the information with them share. However, pay attention, it's a July 4th, 1993 document. So a lot of information, say, has been rearranged. But the most important thing is that we have people here who bring this kind of information in a way where the basic common man can choose to take him time and apply himself, opposed to just jumping at the middle of things. You know what I mean? So again, I share this information on this document for so people can, take a look, take them time, acquire this book. Let me.
The Federal Zone Cracking the Code of Internal Revenue by Mitch Modeleski, 4th edition, electronic version. Note: Mr. Modeleski analyzes Title 26 of the U.S. Code, IRS tax statutes, among others, to elucidate the subtleties of our complex republic and its modern distortions. This book is about much more than tax protest. It's a mini-course in citizenship and its eternal responsibilities in preventing tyranny. Certain notations are used throughout the text, which are absolutely essential to understanding the concepts presented. Dimitri. Published by Account for Better Citizenship Care of USPS, Post Office Box, 6189 San Rafael, California Republic, Postal Code 94903-0189, TDC, July 4, 1993. Table of Contents. Disclaimer, Special Notice, Dedications, Notations. Introduction. Chapter 1, The Brushaber Decision. Chapter 2, Status and Jurisdiction. Chapter 3, The Matrix. Chapter 4, The Three United States. Chapter 5, What State Are You In? Chapter 6, Empirical Results. Chapter 7, Inside Sources. Chapter 8, Is It Voluntary? Chapter 9, The Law of Presumption. Chapter 10, The Fundamental Law. Chapter 11, Sovereignty. Chapter 12, Includes What? Chapter 13, Amendment 16 Postmortem. Chapter 14, Conclusions. Appendices. A. Letter to John Knox and Memorandum of Law. B. Omnibus Acts. C. Treasury Decision 2313. D. Form 1040 for 1913, Instructions Only Elect version. E. Viacom transcript. F. Affidavit of rescission. G. Deceptive IRS code words. H. Analysis of U.S. versus Hicks. I. Notice to 50 governors. J. Petitions to Congress. K. IRS Form 1040-NR, not available in elect version. L. IRS Form W8. M. List of organizations. N. Bibliography. O. Constructive notice and demand. P. Miscellaneous letters. Question apportionment statute. R. Affirmations, within and without. S. Affidavit of foreign status. T. Revocation of birth certificate. U. Revocation of voter registration. V. Affidavit of applicable law. W. Memos on Downs versus Bidwell. X. Certificate of exemption from withholding. Y. Memoranda of law by Richard MacDonald. Z. The nature and cause, case law. Disclaimer. This book is designed to educate you about federal income tax law, the Treasury regulations which promulgate that law, and the various court decisions which have interpreted both. It is sold with the understanding that the author and publisher are not engaged in rendering legal services of any kind. The right to author and publish this book, no matter how often the statutes, regulations, and case law are quoted, is explicitly guaranteed by the First Amendment to the Constitution for the United States of America, a written contract to which the federal government, the 50 states, and their respective agencies are all parties. Federal and state laws are changing constantly, and no single book can possibly address all legal situations in which you may find yourself now or in the future.
So this is a document where people can choose to avail themselves and thus, read or just study or just familiarize yourself with the federal zone, with the Federal Reserve System, and with this commercial arena or venue. Yeah, man. Again, we don't need to be no rocket scientist, All we have to do is just basically apply ourselves. And we have a plethora of areas where people can choose to get involved. Listen to some of the information, listen to some of the concept and the ideas, but most importantly, ones have to do the research for themselves. Nothing is new under the sun. We said it, but it's like when we say it, hey, we are regurgitated. When anybody else say it, it's okay. It's like when you have a book such as the Bible, and a man quote 2 Psalms, a man I say, I regurgitate. Then what the preacher them a do? What the teacher them a do? If them have documents in place, what them are called laws, which is the Constitution, and from that, them create policies, guys as laws, because an act cannot be a law. A statute cannot be in a law. And even when we say the statute at large, isn't it just that? Statutes. However, it's neither here nor there. We have to just try to apply ourselves in whichever way we can. And we're not going to be no dumbo, and we're not going to allow people to just tell we say, hey, you people are dumb. We're not going to accept that. We are going to apply ourselves as best as we know how, and we're going to choose go to places where can bring at least two sides of the coin. If we have a system, which is this foreign system where I'm gonna always talk about, which is this commercial system or this Federal Reserve system or this, what would you call it? Foreign construct. It's all foreign to us. That is the foundation of Ayman claim. It's all foreign to us. And if it's a 1930 act that create the Federal Reserve system, which is, say, the present day now economical or commercial system, because the very same federal goes straight across the board, even right here on our island. We have central bank right here in our location. And we're going to read documents like Investopedia. You have a set of information there where they will break down the Federal Reserve System, and them are going to tell you, say, boy, them not really, nobody not really own that thing. When other people will say, yo, it come from the Rothschild group. So we just there for shine light on information. That's all it is. We all say, boy, look. If you have said this, that's fine. But we don't mind look for ourselves, and we don't mind you just say compare notes. We don't mind get second and third opinions. And we don't mind hear it from the judges, so-called, themselves. We don't mind look at those documents. We don't mind look at the case laws that support certain kind of information where we are present. So this is why I would recommend this book as a great reading, as a tool to the ones them we choose to apply themselves. Yeah, man, and you just add it to all the other information where you get from all these other areas, all these other good brothers out there. Nothing is wrong with it. It's just about compartmentalizing what you do. That's all it is. Step at a time, man. Step at a time. The economical system that is there is the very same commercial system that is there. It is the very same federal system that is there. All of them is interconnected. All light is foreign to us, so we have to apply ourselves, learn how we can navigate without succumb to the lure, without losing our soul. And we can't do that without information, and it now gonna be a one-sided information where it's like me know everything. No. Can't be. Yeah, man. It's about, looking out there and, choosing which side of the fence you want to stand on. And I said the lawful side. Yeah, not necessarily the economical side, not necessarily the commercial side, not necessarily the, illusionary financial side. People, when you're in doubt, just be easy. Do not act. Just be easy. Yeah, man. Be patient so you can learn, so you can get the information before you act. But them thing we are talking about, it's not a feel-good thing where, if you now say something so make we feel good, we don't have no interest. No, we have to look at information. Let's apply ourselves. And we don't necessarily want, follow the guidelines per se where Babylon are laid down for us. We don't necessarily have no interest in that. If that's the case, then most people would be all right, or at least society would be in a better state. So we no mind a look at a place like freedomschool.com. That's a beautiful area with a plethora of information. You just have to, know where you try ascertain. And all it is, you do your own due diligent search. And you take it step by step. But again, the federal zone cracking the code of the Internal Revenue by Mitch, Modeleski. Yeah, man, it's a very good read. When you talk about the 3 United States, these things are relevant. You understand? And again, this document here is from 1993. So there's a lot of subtle changes, especially when it comes on to the uniform commercial codes, but then change up certain things. But again, feel free, match it up with, the information where other good brothers out there are bring forward, but have your own set of documentation where should give you some kind of clarity and foundation, some kind of understanding. Everybody not learn at the same pace, and everybody are gonna learn at the same place. Not the same pace, not the same place. So make we give thanks for the giving of thanks. Make we give thanks for life. Yeah, man. Now make us see if I can bring out the information where the ones them can locate this thing and pay for this thing.
Future. The Federal Zone. Cracking the Code of Internal Revenue Common Law Copyright July 4th, 1993 Mitch Modeleski. The information contained in this book is lawfully protected from reproduction, infringements for purposes of generating revenue of any kind. Violators are hereby warned that they can and will be prosecuted to the full extent of American law, at the sole discretion of the author and publisher. The only other restriction on the use and dissemination of the electronic 4th edition is the requirement that users not modify the content of the character stream in any way. The purpose of this requirement is faithfully to preserve all punctuation, capitalization, bold, italics, and underlines exactly as found in the original text. Permission is hereby given to translate the electronic 4th edition into formats compatible with different word processors, resulting at most in cosmetic changes like different margins, which may cause changes in pagination. Published by Account for Better Citizenship Care of USPS, Post Office Box, 6189 San Rafael, California Republic Postal Code 94903-0189, TDC, with explicit reservation of all rights, and without prejudice to any rights. Per Uniform Commercial Code Article 1, Section 207, see Appendix F. Special Notice. This book is protected by a common law copyright under the name of the author. One of the main purposes of this book is to explain how we, the American people, have been deliberately deceived by government officials who have systematically exploited this deception to defraud us of our wealth and our freedom. If you make unauthorized copies of this book without paying the author for those copies, you are obtaining unjust enrichment by doing so, and therefore you are no different from the government officials who are stealing from you. Your continued financial support will be most appreciated and will be spent to cover the time and expenses of people in the freedom movement who are now dedicating precious time and energy to defend your rights and your freedoms. To order additional copies, or to donate funds to cover unauthorized photocopies, please dispatch first-class mail to Account for Better Citizenship Care of USPS, Post Office Box, 6189 San Rafael, California Republic Postal Code 94903-0189, TDC. This U.S. Post Office Box requires first-class mail to bear postage at the minimum rate of 29 cents for the first ounce. Single copy cost $25 includes shipping and handling via first-class U.S. mail. Express mail. $35 includes shipping and handling via express U.S. mail. The electronic version is shipped on a 3.5 inches floppy disk formatted by MS-DOS to contain 1.44 megabytes. Appendices D, K, and L are missing from the electronic version. Printed copies of these appendices can be obtained by writing to the publisher. The printed second edition remains $40 while supplies last. We will accept cash, checks, and blank postal money orders. A blank postal money order shows nothing on the payee line, allowing us to write our own payee on this line and to negotiate the money order freely. Sorry, but we do not take credit cards. We reserve the right to endorse your checks without prejudice UCC 1 to 207 and without granting jurisdiction. CC Appendix F. Thank you very much for your interest and support. Publication history. First edition January 1992, hard copy. Second edition July 4, 1992, hard copy. Third edition January 1993, electronic. Fourth edition July 4, 1993, electronic. Dedications. If Frank Brushaber was a non-resident alien, then so am I, and so are millions of other Americans who will know the truth if we teach them. We have in our political system a government of the United States ***, and a government of each of the several states. Each one of these governments is distinct from the others, and each has citizens of its own. Slaughterhouse Cases, United States versus Cruikshank, 92 U.S. 542, 1875. It is quite clear, then, that there is a citizenship of the United States ***, and a citizenship of a state, which are distinct from each other, and which depend upon different characteristics or circumstances in the individual. Slaughterhouse Cases, 83 U.S. 36, 1873. Mitch Modeleski, Founder Count for Better Citizenship, San Rafael, California Republic, July 4, 1993. Notations. The Supreme Court has officially defined the key term, United States, to have three separate and distinct meanings. It may be the name of a sovereign occupying the position of other sovereigns in the family of nations. It may designate the limited territory over which the sovereignty of the federal government extends. It may be the collective name for the 50 states which are united by and under the Constitution. Understanding these several meanings is absolutely crucial to understanding the remainder of this book. Much confusion will result from failing to recognize or decipher the meaning that is used in any given context. In order to reinforce their importance, these three meanings will be identified by using the following convention whenever possible. 1. United States * or U.S. ***, first meaning. The name of the sovereign nation, occupying the position of other sovereigns in the family of nations. 2. United States ***, or U.S. ***, second meaning. The federal government and the limited territory over which it exercises exclusive sovereign authority. 3. United States ***, or U.S. ***, third meaning. The collective name for the states united by and under the Constitution for the United States of America. At the risk of being criticized for violating formal English style, quotations have also been modified with this notation. The risk of misunderstanding was judged to be far more serious than any violations of conventional style. It is the author's sincere intent that the addition of asterisks will be obvious in all cases, even if the meaning of United States is not obvious in any particular case. Exceptions to this convention will be made for book titles, for United States codes, abbreviated USC or USC, for the United States, or US. Constitution and for the United States, or U.S. Supreme Court. Other notations should be obvious from their context, but will be repeated here for extra clarity. IR means Internal Revenue. Example, IR Manual refers to the IRS Internal Revenue Manual. IRC means Internal Revenue Code, also known as Title 26. IRS means Internal Revenue Service in the Department of the Treasury. USC means United States Code. Example, 26 USC 7701 refers to Title 26, United States Codes, Section 7701. CFR means Code of Federal Regulations. Example, 26 CFR 1.871-1 are the regulations for Section 871 of Title 26. TD means Treasury Decision, a written decision published in the Federal Register by the Treasury Department. US means United States Decision when used to cite a ruling of the Supreme Court. Example, 324 U.S. 652 refers to Volume 324, page 652 of Supreme Court decisions. If a nation expects to be ignorant and free, it expects something it cannot be. Thomas Jefferson. Help us to abolish the specter of modern slavery, which now threatens to destroy the essential rights and freedoms which made this a great nation and the envy of others around the world. Help us to restore a government which has drifted so far off course it hardly resembles the constitutional republic it was designed to be. From cover page notice to 50 governors account for better citizenship. Next contents, political quercetins hyperdime. Introduction.
I'm going to play just this introduction and then I'll have to move away from this thing and the item can choose to take a look at this kind of information.
Introduction. In the late spring of the year 1990, our small beach town in Northern California was visited by a minor political controversy. A local writer for the weekly newspaper, a man named Kirby Ferris, had a number of neighbors buzzing about his recent sequence of articles challenging the 16th Amendment, the so-called income tax amendment in the U.S. Constitution. It seems that Kirby had come across some huge collection of documents which allegedly proved that the 16th Amendment was never ratified. Instead of obtaining the required approval of 36 state legislatures, the proposed amendment was simply declared ratified on February 25, 1913 by Philander C. Knox, a man who purported to be Secretary of State. Kirby Ferris had, evidently, visited one of the men responsible for assembling this collection of 17,000 state-certified documents, and returned entirely convinced that the so-called 16th Amendment was a complete and total fraud. The man he visited was Martin J. Red Beckman, a Montana rancher, whose name now appears as co-author with Bill Benson on the cover of The Law That Never Was, a book that has already become a classic in American historical literature. Up to that point in time, I had not been much of a Ferris fan. Too often for me, his style bordered on being too inflammatory and lacking necessary details. After all, Kirby had spent his youth surfing waves, drinking beer, and chasing bikinis. When this little controversy erupted, I made no secret of my bachelor's degree in political science from UCLA and my master's degree from the University of California at Irvine in public administration. Trotting out these credentials, of course, was invariably my preface to answering the several questions which friends and neighbors put to me about Kirby's allegations, as if to underscore my obvious qualifications to repudiate Kirby's claims. If there's a problem, Congress will just fix it, I must have said more times than I care to admit. One day at breakfast in the Parkside Cafe, a favorite hangout for all the locals, the same conversation began again, this time with a Vietnam War veteran by the name of Mike Taylor. Mike is an intense man, with fierce convictions, a booming voice, a few lingering effects of combat shell shock, and a habit of getting right to the point. What do you think of Kirby's columns on income tax? He queried. Again, as if to practice a polished art, I repeated the same old answer one more time. Congress will just fix it, if there really is a problem with the 16th Amendment. The answer had worked in the past. There was no reason why it wouldn't work on Mike too. Wrong. Mike shot right back, okay. You're so smart. How is Congress going to fix it? He retorted. They'll pass a law. How else do you think they would fix it? I answered, somewhat surprised from pride to be challenged so directly. And then Mike lowered the boom. Are you telling me that Congress can amend the Constitution by passing a law? Is that what you're telling me? My jaw fell, as if to begin my next sentence, but no words came out of my mouth. I knew that he had me. Congress cannot amend the Constitution. Of course, Mike was right. In a feeble attempt to recover, I retreated by admitting that 2/3 of the states were required to amend the Constitution, and that Congress alone did not have the power to do so. Then Mike delivered the knockout punch. It takes 3/4 of the states to amend the Constitution, Mitch, not 2/3. I was had. All those years in school, all those high school civics classes, all those papers on political theory, and all those months of management science had left me woefully unprepared to spar with Mike when it came to the supreme law of our land. The lesson was a good one that I will never forget for the rest of my days. My embarrassed defeat was a terrific motivation. I went to work ordering books and reading everything I could get my hands on. A purchase order flew up to Red Beckman in Billings, Montana. Within a week, I was devouring my own copy of the law that never was. I had to repent for my errors, or so my religious training had led me to believe. The book was a turning point, in more ways than one. I knew enough about the rules of evidence to question every page. How could this problem have gone undetected for such a very long time? I asked myself. Here were allegations which appeared to undermine a major source of revenue for the entire federal government of the United States. I needed more proof. I wrote to Kirby and explained my situation. It had been many years since my college political activism. I was now a senior systems consultant for a major investment bank in San Francisco, with almost 20 years of computer experience under my belt. I was often seen blending in among the gray men of the financial district, not too far from a regional Federal Reserve Bank. If I was going to take this problem very seriously, and in particular, if I was ever going to do anything about the 16th Amendment fraud, then I was going to need something more than a printed book from some Montana rancher I had never met. After all, with enough money, anybody can put ink to paper and put almost anything into circulation these days. I needed something more. I needed material evidence, as they call it in courtrooms and in law schools, material evidence, not hearsay, and certainly not unsubstantiated allegations that a massive fiscal fraud had been perpetrated on the American people for more than 2 generations. Kirby rose to the occasion. Tell me what you need, he said. I thought about it and invited him to come over for coffee. If there really were 17,000 documents, all officially certified by the Secretaries of State in the Capitol buildings of 48 of the United States, there was no point in plowing through such a huge mound of paperwork. Paperwork was something which I put somewhere below a necessary evil. We put our heads together and came up with a plan. The feds have admitted in writing that 6 states did not ratify the 16th Amendment. Since 3/4 of the states were required to ratify it, the amendment could have passed with at most 12 states opposing it. If we could find only 7 additional states which obviously failed to ratify the amendment, that would make a total of 13 nays, and we would have defeated the income tax. What a tantalizing thought! Before the night was over, we had our list of the Dirty Seven, as Kirby liked to call them. Kirby Ferris went home to call Red Beckman. 2 days later, Kirby left a short note on my front door. Red Beckman had agreed to photocopy all the relevant documents for the Dirty Seven states and would ship them to us as soon as the copying was done. Within a week, 2 large cardboard boxes were sitting on my front porch when I returned home from work. There it was, the evidence I needed. It was incontrovertible. The 16th Amendment was never ratified. The act of declaring it ratified was an act of outright fraud by Secretary of State Philander C. Knox, a man who was sworn to obey the Constitution. This was an awesome discovery. The events which have transpired since that moment have literally changed my life. I have filed formal petitions with 2 representatives in the Congress of the United States. A detailed notice of fraud and deception has been served on all the governors of the 50 states. I have requested a grand jury investigation into the fraud committed by Secretary of State Philander C. Knox. I have studied and debated and learned everything I could about the laws and regulations which bear on this question. It has been an exhilarating and challenging experience. Almost all of the opposition has come from government personnel, mostly officials of the Internal Revenue Service. That opposition has been most instructive. For those of you who may not know exactly how and where the U.S. Constitution is relevant to this subject matter, the text of the failed 16th Amendment follows. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes, from whatever source derived, without apportionment among the several states, and without regard to any census or enumeration. Constitution for the United States of America, text of so-called 16th Amendment. From the beginning, the U.S. Constitution has empowered Congress to levy 2 different kinds of taxes, direct and indirect. These are powers which Congress has always had, with or without the so-called 16th Amendment. The power to levy indirect taxes is authorized by Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, as follows. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States, but all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. Constitution for the United States of America, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1. Federal excise taxes on the sale of gasoline and tires are examples of indirect taxes. The requirement that indirect taxes be uniform throughout the several states is known as the uniformity rule. The power to levy direct taxes is authorized by 2 separate clauses of the Constitution as follows. Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states, which may be included within this union, according to their respective numbers. Constitution for the United States of America, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3. No capitation, or other direct, tax shall be laid, unless in proportion to the census, or enumeration hereinbefore directed to be taken. Constitution for the United States of America, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 4. Thus, the requirement that direct taxes be apportioned was considered by the framers to be so important, it is mentioned twice in the U.S. Constitution. This requirement is known as the apportionment rule, and its application is easy to understand. If California has 10% of the nation's population, then California's portion would be 10% of any direct tax imposed by Congress. A capitation is another word for a direct tax imposed on each head or person. Caput is Latin for head. Federal taxes on personal property, or on the income of personal property, are examples of direct taxes. Appendix Q shows the state portions of a lawful direct tax that was levied by Congress in the year 1798. Next, previous contents.
Give thanks. Give thanks. Give thanks. I don't think I can go any further with this contents. Because I know
Chapter 1, the Brushaber.
this copyright issue is there, but let me at least look at just chapter 1 and then we'll move on.
Brushaber decision. Historically, defensive federal officials have argued that the 16th Amendment is constitutional because the Supreme Court of the United States has said so. In the year 1916, the High Court issued a pivotal decision, which is identified in the case law as Brushaber versus Union Pacific Railroad Company, 240 U.S. 1. It is important to realize that the evidence impugning the ratification of the 16th Amendment was not published until the year 1985. This evidence was simply not available to plaintiff Frank R. Brushaber when he filed his first complaint on March 13, 1914, in the District Court of the United States for the Southern District of New York. His complaint challenged the constitutionality of the income tax statute, which Congress had passed immediately after the 16th Amendment was declared ratified. Specifically, he challenged the constitutionality of the income tax as it applied to a corporation of which he was a shareholder, i.e., the Union Pacific Railroad Company. His challenge went all the way to the Supreme Court, and he lost. Ever since then, attorneys, judges, and other officials of the federal government have been quick to cite the Brushaber case, and others which followed, as undeniable proof that the 16th Amendment is constitutional. With its constitutionality settled by the Brushaber ruling, former Commissioner of Internal Revenue Donald C. Alexander felt free, almost 60 years later, to cite the 16th Amendment as the constitutional authority for the government to tax the income of individuals and corporations. Consider the following statement of his, which was published in the Official Federal Register of March 29, 1974, in the section entitled Department of the Treasury, Internal Revenue Service, Organization and Functions. His statement reads in part, 2. Since 1862, the Internal Revenue Service has undergone a period of steady growth as the means for financing government operations shifted from the levying of import duties to internal taxation. Its expansion received considerable impetus in 1913 with the ratification of the 16th Amendment to the Constitution, under which Congress received constitutional authority to levy taxes on the income of individuals and corporations. Volume 39, number 62, page 11,572. What is not widely known about the Brushaber decision is the essence of the ruling. Contrary to widespread legal opinion, which has persisted even until now, the Supreme Court ruled that taxation on income is an indirect tax, not a direct tax. The Supreme Court also ruled that the 16th Amendment did not change or repeal any part of the Constitution, nor did it authorize any direct tax without apportionment. To illustrate the persistence of wrong opinions, on a recent vacation to Montana, I had occasion to visit the federal building in the city of Missoula. On the wall outside the Federal District Court, room 263, a printed copy of the U.S. Constitution is displayed in text which annotates the 16th Amendment with the following statement. This amendment modifies paragraph 3, section 2, of Article 1 and paragraph 4, section 9, of Article 1. In light of the Brushaber decision, this statement is plainly wrong and totally misleading. The text of the 16th Amendment contains absolutely no references to other sections of the Constitution, unlike the repeal of prohibition. In his excellent book entitled The Best Kept Secret, author Otto Skinner reviews a number of common misunderstandings like this about the 16th Amendment and provides ample support in subsequent case law for the clarifications he provides. Interested readers are encouraged to order Otto Skinner's work by referring to the bibliography, Appendix N. The U.S. Constitution still requires that federal direct taxes must be apportioned among the 50 states of the Union. Thus, if California has 10% of the nation's population, then California's portion would be 10% of any direct federal tax. In the Brushaber decision, the Supreme Court concluded that income taxes are excises which fall into the category of indirect taxes, not direct taxes. From the beginning, the U.S. Constitution has made an explicit distinction between the two types of taxation authorized to the Congress, with separate limitations for each type. Indirect taxes must be uniform across the states. Direct taxes must be apportioned. Writing for the majority in one of his clearer passages, Chief Justice Edward Douglas White explained it this way. The conclusion reached in the Pollock case did not in any degree involve holding that income taxes generically and necessarily came within the class of direct taxes on property, but on the contrary recognized the fact that taxation on income was in its nature an excise entitled to be enforced as such. Brushaber versus Union Pacific Railroad Company, 240 U.S. 1, 1916. Unfortunately for Justice White, most of the language he chose to write the majority's opinion and the resulting logic contained therein are tortuously convoluted and almost totally unintelligible, even to college-educated English majors. In his wonderful tour de force entitled Tax Scam, author Alan Stang quips that Justice White turned himself into a pretzel trying to justify the new tax without totally junking the Constitution. Stang's book is a must, if only because it's extraordinary, which is totally rare among the tax books listed in the bibliography, Appendix N. Other legal scholars and experienced constitutional lawyers have published books which take serious aim at one or more elements of White's ruling. Jeffrey Dickstein's Judicial Tyranny and Your Income Tax, and Vern Holland's The Law That Always Was, are two excellent works of this kind. Both authors focus on the constitutional distinctions between direct and indirect taxes, and between the apportionment and uniformity rules. Dickstein does a masterful job of tracing a century of federal court decisions, with an emphasis on the bias and conflict among federal court definitions of the key word income. He exercises rigorous logic to demonstrate how the Brushaber ruling stands in stark contrast to the important Supreme Court precedents that came before and after it in time. For example, after meticulous comparison of Pollock with Brushaber, Dickstein is forced to conclude that Justice White's indirect attempt to overturn Pollock is wholly unpersuasive. He clearly failed to state a historical, factual, or legal basis for his conclusion that a tax on income is an indirect excise tax. It is clear that Mr. Brushaber and his attorneys correctly stated the proposition to the Supreme Court that the 16th Amendment relieved the income tax, which was a direct tax, from the requirement of apportionment, and that the Brushaber court failed miserably in attempting to refute Mr. Brushaber's legal position. Judicial Tyranny and Your Income Tax, page 60. Dickstein also proves that an irreconcilable conflict exists between the Brushaber decision and a subsequent key decision of the Supreme Court, Eisner versus Macoma, 252 U.S. 189. There is an irreconcilable conflict between the Brushaber case, which holds the income tax is an indirect tax not requiring apportionment, and the Eisner case, which holds the income tax is a direct tax relieved from apportionment. Judicial Tyranny and Your Income Tax, footnote on page 141. Going back even further in American history, Holland argues persuasively that income taxes have always been direct taxes, which must be apportioned even today, Brushaber notwithstanding. It results, therefore, 4. That the 16th Amendment did not amend the Constitution. The United States Supreme Court, by unanimous decisions, determined that the amendment did not grant any new powers of taxation, that a direct tax cannot be relieved from the constitutional mandate of apportionment, and the only effect of the amendment was to overturn the theory advanced in the Pollock case, which held that a tax on income was in legal effect a tax on the sources of the income. 6. A general tax on income levied upon one of the citizens of the several states has always been a direct tax and must be apportioned. The law that always was, page 220. There are, however, two additional lessons from the Brushaber decision which have been entirely lost on most, if not all of the authors who have published any analysis of this important ruling. These are the dual issues of status and jurisdiction, issues which it is my intention to elevate to the level of importance which they have always deserved. An understanding of status and jurisdiction places the Brushaber ruling in a new and different light, and solves a number of persistent mysteries and misunderstandings which have grown up around an income tax law which now includes some 2,000 pages of statute and 6,000 pages of regulations. More precisely, the published rules of statutory construction require us to say that the income tax law now includes only 2,000 pages of statute and 6,000 pages of regulations. Obviously, without a comprehensive paradigm with which to navigate such a vast quantity of legalese, particularly when this legalese is only slightly more intelligible than White's verbal pretzels, it is easy to understand why professors, lawyers, CPAs, judges, prosecutors, defendants, and juries consistently fail to fathom its meaning. In the republic envisioned by the framers of the Constitution, a sophisticated paradigm should not be necessary for the ordinary layman to understand any law.
Thank you.
In and of itself, the need for a sophisticated paradigm is a sufficient ground to nullify the law for being vague and too difficult to understand in the first place. Nevertheless, the remainder of this book will show that status and jurisdiction together provide a comprehensive paradigm with sufficient explanatory power not only to solve the persistent mysteries, but also to provide vast numbers of Americans with the tax relief they so desperately need and deserve. Next, previous contents.
Give thanks. Only because we don't monetize over here on this platform. But I know, I direct you guys to purchase this book. And again, it's from 1993, so there's, a lot of changes and all of these things. So just
Chapter
make the
2,
effort.
Status.
Make the effort. But let's continue just a little bit further.
And jurisdiction. Understanding the status of the parties to the Brushaber case is essential to understanding both the outcome and the Treasury decision, which followed soon after the Supreme Court's landmark ruling in the case. Frank R. Brushaber filed his original bill of complaint on March 13, 1914, within a year after Philander C. Knox declared the 16th Amendment to be the supreme law of the land. Addressing the judges of the District Court of the United States for the Southern District of New York, Brushaber began his complaint as follows. Frank R. Brushaber, a citizen of the state of New York and a resident of the borough of Brooklyn, in the city of New York, brings this his bill against Union Pacific Railroad Company, a corporation and citizen of the state of Utah, having its executive office and a place of business in the borough of Manhattan, in the city of New York, and the Southern District of New York, in his own behalf and on behalf of any and all of the stockholders of the defendant Union Pacific Railroad Company, who may join in the prosecution and contribute to the expenses of this suit. Right from the beginning, Frank Brushaber made an important statement of fact, which remained unchallenged at every level in the federal courts. He identified himself as a citizen of the state of New York and a resident of the borough of Brooklyn, in the city of New York. He did not identify himself as a United States *** citizen, or as a resident of the United States ***. He indicated that he lived and worked in New York State, outside the District of Columbia, and outside any territory, possession, or enclave controlled by the Congress of the United States ***. Enclaves are areas within the 50 states, which are ceded to Congress by the acts of state legislatures, e.g. military bases. The federal courts concluded that Brushaber, under the law, was a non-resident alien. He was non-resident because he lived and worked outside the areas of land over which the Congress has exclusive jurisdiction. The authority to have exclusive jurisdiction over this land was granted to Congress by Article 1, Section 8 Clause 17, and Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2 of the Constitution. In this book, I will often refer to these areas of land as the federal zone. Brushaber was an alien because his statement of citizenship was taken as proof that he was not a citizen of the federal zone. He was not a United States *** citizen, either through birth or naturalization, because the term United States *** in this context means only the federal zone. Therefore, he was alien with respect to the District of Columbia and the federal enclaves, territories and possessions over which the Congress has exclusive legislative jurisdiction. This may sound strange to the casual reader, but the law is not referring to creatures from outer space. The law is referring to the creation of lawyers. Right from the beginning, Frank Brushaber also made an important error which contributed to his ultimate downfall in the case. He identified his opposition as a corporation chartered by the state of Utah. Your orator further shows that the defendant Union Pacific Railroad Company is, and at all the times hereinafter mentioned was, a corporation duly organized and existing under, and by virtue of the laws of the state of Utah, and a citizen of the state of Utah. From original bill of complaint, filed March 13, 1914. This was incorrect. The Union Pacific Railroad Company was originally created in the year 1862 by an act of Congress. The stated purpose of the corporation was to aid in the construction of a railroad and telegraph line from the Missouri River to the Pacific Ocean. This act was passed on July 1, 1862 by the 37th Congress, Second Session, as recorded in the statutes at large, December 5, 1859 to March 3, 1863 at Chapter CXX, page 489. At that time, Utah had not yet been admitted as a state of the Union. It was still a territory, i.e., a federal state, over which the Congress had exclusive legislative jurisdiction. Being a creation of Congress, the Union Pacific Railroad Company was found to be a domestic corporation under the law. This is another term, which is very confusing to the casual reader. In common, everyday language, the term domestic is often used to mean inside the country. For example, airports are divided into different areas for domestic and foreign flights, in order to allow customs agents to inspect the baggage and passports of passengers arriving on flights from foreign countries. However, under federal tax law, the term domestic does not mean inside the country, it means inside the federal zone, which is an area that is much smaller than the whole country. Accordingly, a foreign corporation is a corporation which was chartered by a government that is outside the federal zone. The federal zone consists of the enclaves, territories and possessions over which the Congress of the United States *** has exclusive legislative jurisdiction. California is outside of the federal zone, for example, and corporations which are chartered in the state of California are foreign corporations with respect to the federal zone. Similarly, corporations chartered in France are likewise foreign corporations with respect to the federal zone. It is simple, once you understand the proper legal definitions of foreign and domestic in the federal tax law. The status of the two parties in the Brushaber case can, therefore, be summarized as follows. 1. State citizen Frank R. Brushaber was identified by his court documents as a non-resident alien, as that term is now defined in the Internal Revenue Code. 2. The Union Pacific Railroad Company was identified by court documents as a domestic corporation, as that term is now defined in the Internal Revenue Code. Government propaganda. The federal government has tried to confuse the implications of Frank Brushaber's status by asserting that he was a French immigrant. This is government propaganda, pure and simple. This propaganda is designed to make us believe that Brushaber was found to be an alien because he was born in France, not because he declared himself to be a citizen of the state of New York. Accordingly, the federal officials responsible for this propaganda are trying in vain to convince everyone that the 50 states are inside the federal zone, because they want us to conclude that Frank Brushaber would have been a U.S. resident if he resided in New York, or U.S. citizen if he had been born in New York. It is fairly easy and fun to defeat this propaganda because it is only make-believe. First of all, Frank Brushaber declared himself to be a resident of the borough of Brooklyn in the city of New York. If New York State were inside the federal zone, and if Frank Brushaber had been born in France, he most certainly would have been an alien, but a resident alien according to the government's own rules. After the Supreme Court's decision, the Treasury Department published a Treasury Decision, TD 2313, which clearly identified Frank Brushaber as a non-resident alien, see below, also Appendix C. Secondly, regardless of whether federal officials place New York State inside or outside the federal zone, their French immigrant theory would place Frank Brushaber in the category of an alien who was lawfully admitted for permanent residence. Congress does have legislative jurisdiction over immigration and naturalization. Being lawfully admitted for permanent residence is also called the green card test, see next chapter. Again, the government's own rules and regulations would have designated Frank Brushaber as a resident alien. As we know, the Treasury Department identified him as a non-resident alien. A native of France would be a non-resident alien if he resided in France. He would be a resident alien if he lawfully immigrated to America under rules established by Congress. But no green card was in evidence to prove that Brushaber was an immigrant, and current green cards exhibit the words resident alien in bold letters. Thirdly, if Frank Brushaber had been a French immigrant who applied for and was granted U.S. citizenship, quite obviously he would have become a naturalized U.S. citizen, no longer an alien. Again, Congress does have jurisdiction over immigration and naturalization. The government's own rules and regulations would have designated Frank Brushaber as a U.S. citizen. Finally, Frank Brushaber identified himself as a citizen of the state of New York. Although a native of France would also be an alien with respect to the federal zone, this is not how Frank Brushaber identified himself to the federal courts. He identified himself as a citizen of the state of New York. On the basis of this status as presented to the federal courts, those same courts, and the Treasury Department thereafter, concluded that he was a non-resident alien, not a U.S. citizen, and not a U.S. resident. To argue that he was a French immigrant is to assume facts that were not in evidence. The courts arrived at their decisions on the basis of facts that were in evidence. Author and scholar Laurie Jacques addresses the French immigrant theory as follows. It appears that a state citizen was identified as a non-resident alien and taxed upon his unearned income deriving from a domestic corporation. This conclusion is possible because there would be no question that a person who, for example, was born and domiciled in France, and who owned shares in Union Pacific Railway, Sitka Company, would be taxed as a non-resident alien. Only Mr. Brushaber, citizen of New York State and stockholder, was considered in the case decided by the Supreme Court. Thus there was no basis for the Secretary extending the decision to those not parties to the action. A Ticket to Liberty, November 1990 edition, page 40. In the final analysis, it doesn't really matter whether Frank Brushaber was a French immigrant or not. The federal courts and the Treasury Department agreed that any person claiming to be citizen and resident of New York was a non-resident alien with respect to the federal zone. This is all we need to know about the plaintiff's status. It is essential to understand that it was the government which determined Frank Brushaber was a non-resident alien for purposes of imposing a federal tax on his dividends. Brushaber did not come into federal court claiming that he was a non-resident alien. He did come into court claiming that he was a New York State citizen and a resident of Brooklyn. Now you see why the French immigrant theory is really just propaganda. In later chapters, the motive for this propaganda will become crystal clear. Treasury Decision 2313. Soon after the Brushaber decision, and as a direct result of that decision, the Office of the Commissioner of Internal Revenue published Treasury Decision TD 2313 to clarify the meaning and consequences of the Supreme Court's ruling. Volume 18 of the Treasury Decisions was published for the period of January to December of 1916 by Secretary of the Treasury W. G. McAdoo. Treasury Decision 2313 was written to clarify the taxability of interest from bonds and dividends on stock of domestic corporations owned by non-resident aliens, and the liabilities of non-resident aliens under Section 2 of the Act of October 3, 1913. Frank Brushaber had purchased stock in the Union Pacific Railroad Company. He was then paid a dividend on this stock. The Union Pacific Railroad Company acted as a withholding agent and withheld a portion of his dividend to pay the federal income tax that was owed on that dividend. The term withholding agent still has the same meaning in the current Internal Revenue Code. Although he was a non-resident alien, Frank Brushaber received income from a source that was inside or within the federal zone. The source of his income was a domestic corporation, because that corporation had been chartered by Congress. The net result of his defeat in the Supreme Court was to render as taxable the income from bond interest and stock dividends issued by domestic corporations to non-resident aliens like Frank Brushaber. A key paragraph from Treasury Decision 2313 is the following. Under the decision of the Supreme Court of the United States in the case of Brushaber v. Union Pacific Railway Company, SIC, decided January 24, 1916, it is hereby held that income accruing to non-resident aliens in the form of interest from the bonds and dividends on the stock of domestic corporations is subject to the income tax imposed by the Act of October 3, 1913. This withholding agent must withhold a certain amount from the dividend to cover the federal tax liability of the recipient. The amount withheld is paid to the federal government. TD 2313 then went on to explain the use of Form 1040 in this situation. The liability, under the provisions of the law, to render personal returns of annual net income accrued to them from sources within the United States ** during the preceding calendar year, attaches to non-resident aliens, as in the case of returns required from citizens and resident aliens. Therefore, a return on Form 1040, revised, is required except in cases where the total tax liability has been or is to be satisfied at the source by withholding or has been or is to be satisfied by personal return on Form 1040, revised, rendered in their behalf. For those of you who are interested, the complete text of Treasury Decision 2313 can be found in Appendix C of this book. Summary. The dual issues of status and jurisdiction are closely intertwined. The federal government has a limited area over which it exercises exclusive legislative jurisdiction, an area I have called the federal zone. Congress is not limited by the constitutional restrictions on direct and indirect taxation within the federal zone. The birth and residency status of natural persons situate them either inside or outside that jurisdiction. Citizens who are naturalized by federal courts are situated inside that jurisdiction, regardless of where they reside. Both citizens and residents of the federal zone are liable for federal taxes on their worldwide income, no matter where the source of that income. If you are not a citizen, then you are an alien. If you are not a resident, then you are a non-resident. Non-resident aliens pay taxes only on income which is derived from sources that are inside the federal zone. If you work for the federal government, your pay comes from a source that is inside the federal zone. Likewise, artificial persons like corporations are either foreign or domestic. It may appear strange at first, but a corporation is also a person, as that term is defined in the Internal Revenue Code. A corporation that is chartered by Congress is domestic with respect to the federal zone. A corporation that is chartered by one of the 50 states of the Union is foreign with respect to the federal zone. A corporation that is chartered by a foreign country like France is likewise foreign with respect to the federal zone. Imagine what a difference it would make if all individuals and corporations knew and asserted their correct status with respect to the exclusive legislative jurisdiction of the federal zone. Next, previous contents.
Give thanks. Give thanks. I'll have to wrap it up right here. Yeah, man. And say complete. Gratitude.
Chapter 2, Status and Jurisdiction.
Gratitude to the freedomschool.com. Yeah, man. Gratitude. supremelaw.org. Gratitude to Mitch Modeleski for sharing this kind of information. And what some people should try to acquire this book, pay fee. And then you know the ones them where in a situation for pay, then can always acquire the book same way. You just don't republish, rebroad, you know what I mean? For make a profit. Hence, we are not monetized here on no level. We just shine light on information so our basic people can, make them basic steps. And what's a give thanks? Complete gratitude. The brave may fall, but never yield. And we say bold and brave, firm and strong. Remember, the man that interferes with a next man's liberty does so at his own peril. Decapitation people. Let's apply ourselves to attain the basic information so we can have correct knowledge and move forward. We don't necessarily have to make an issue of it. We just shine light on information. Gratitude for the time. Gratitude again. Salute.